Okay, good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday night, so it's Halacha and Tanya. Last time we started the dinam of the after bracha. Okay, the dinam of the first bracha, initial bracha, the after bracha. And we're discussing that the only time you make an after bracha on food if you ate enough or drank enough. Now, for food, the necessity of making an after bracha chrein, as it's called, is when you eat a kazayis, which is approximately 1 ounce of food. Then you make an after bracha. Drink is a revius, which is approximately 3 ounces. So if you drink 3 ounces of liquid, you make an after bracha. Unless if it's water and you're not thirsty, then we learn you don't make an after bracha. You don't make a bracha before also. So if somebody ate 1 ounce of food or drank 1 ounce of liquid, so then you have to make an after bracha. We also learned that food and drinks don't combine. If somebody ate a half an ounce of food and drank 1.5 ounces of liquid, so even though together would make up the proper amount, but food and drink don't mix as far as halacha goes, and therefore you wouldn't be able to make an after bracha. Now, what happens if somebody ate? This is what I'm just repeating quickly what we learned last week. Some opinions say if you eat an entire fruit, that means the whole fruit is not divided before it's cut up before you come to the table. You eat a whole grape. There are opinions that say you should make an after bracha on it because it's a whole fruit, so it has its prominence. We learned that the practical halacha is you don't, but halacha says you should try not to eat just one grape. If you want to eat grapes, eat them enough grapes that it should be considered an ounce of food to make an after bracha. Now, a lot of times, by the way, this we didn't discuss last week, but a lot of times people don't know actually did they eat a kazayis or not. So let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say you have crackers. Okay, you know, the Lieber's cracker, the round crackers. Now, somebody might think, okay, 2 crackers would be a kazayis. But the truth is, it's not true. Because if you could do it if you want for homework, you could do it, take the box of crackers, the whole box, I believe it says, I figured it out, I remember what I figured out. But the whole box, I believe, is 20 ounces, and there's 4 stacks of crackers in it, and you count out how many crackers there are, and you divide it by 20, and then you know how many crackers is in 1 ounce. And if I'm not mistaken, there's something like 9.5 crackers would make 1 ounce. So therefore, if somebody would be eating crackers, then you're not eating an ounce, so then you can make an after bracha. Going off topic for a second, if somebody heard kiddush and they need to eat cake, and you need to eat a kazayis of cake to be yetzer kiddush, because kiddush has to be in a place of a meal, and somebody had only a few crackers, let's say they had 5 crackers, and when they made kiddush, so they did not fulfill the obligation of kiddush, and therefore they're not allowed to eat the cholent either. So you have to make sure when you're eating food that you have an amount, approximately the weight of 1 ounce. Now we also have to keep in mind that certain things are like just in cakes. Let's say sponge cake is much lighter weight than a Danish. So you'd have to eat more of sponge cake to eat a kazayis, to be able to make an after bracha than you would if you would be eating a brownie or a Danish, which is thicker, and therefore an ounce would be in a smaller amount of quantity. So again, you have to make sure, though, that you're eating an ounce and drinking 3 ounces of water, 3 ounces of drink. And we also, the last thing one more thing before we go back to where we're up to, and that is, what happens if somebody ate a half an ounce of cake, a half an ounce of an apple? Okay? Now, the after bracha normally for cake would be ala michya. The after bracha for apple would be ber nefashos. But the truth is, you didn't eat a kazayis of either. So because they're both foods, halachically they do combine, but now you have a kazayis. Okay, now you have an ounce. But the question is, what after bracha do I make? So therefore, the din is, you make the lesser of the after brachas, which means if I had a half an ounce of cake, a half an ounce of apple, I'll make a ber nefashos. because that's the lesser of the brachas. Halamichia is a more prominent bracha than brain nefashos. Now somebody's asking if you have a bowl of pasta, that's definitely a kazayas, unless you have what's the baby bear in the Goldilocks story? Maybe they had a very small portion, but a normal bowl of pasta is much more than a kazayas. So that again would be now. What happens if you have? And here's an interesting argument, halacha. What happens if you have a half an ounce of bread and a half an ounce of grapes? So you don't have any brain nefashos. So then, according to the Alter Rebbe, you would make ala michya. I'm sorry, ala eitz. You ate bread. So you can bench because you didn't eat a kazayas of bread, but you can't say ala michya, but you say ala eitz, which is the bracha for the grape, which is the lesser of benching versus ala eitz. Okay, that's now we're up to now is it this. In order to be able to make an after bracha, it has to be done within a certain amount of time. If somebody ate an ounce in a half an hour, okay, or drank 3 ounces within a half an hour, the din is you can't make an after bracha. An after bracha must be said eating it within a certain amount of time. Again, and we learned it ranges from 2 minutes to 11 minutes. The accepted opinion is 7 minutes, which means as follows. If I ate an ounce of food within 7 minutes from the time I started until I finished eating that ounce, that I can make an after bracha. But if it took me 10 minutes to eat 1 ounce of food, okay, I was nibbling on it, and it took me 10 minutes to eat 1 ounce of food, I cannot make an after bracha because it was too long of a space in between. It's not called eating. If I'm sipping a hot cup of tea or a very hot cup of coffee, and it's taking me more than 7 minutes to drink 3 ounces of coffee or tea or whatever, so then I cannot make an after bracha because the duration was too long for me to be able to make an after bracha. So people need to keep in mind that that's what they need to do. Okay, now another interesting question. I mean, not a question, a thing. What happens, and this can happen very often, I'm eating fruit. Okay, so I'm eating, let's say, grapes or dates or figs or pomegranates or olives, and plus I'm eating an apple. So I had a kazayas of the fruit of ala eitz. I ate an ounce of grapes or pomegranate or figs, dates, whatever it may be. Okay, but I also ate an ounce of apple. I'm eating a whole fruit meal, whatever. So then there's interesting thing. I don't have to make a brain of nefashos. If I ate an egg, which has nothing to do with those fruits, then I would have to make a brain of nefashos. But if I'm eating fruit, okay, and there are the 5 fruits besides wheat and barley that Israel was praised with, and therefore I make a special after bracha, al ha'etz val pi ha'etz, that includes the apple after bracha too, because apple is also a fruit. It's just not a fruit that would demand a special after bracha. But if I'm making that after bracha anyway, because I ate grapes, dates, figs, whatever it is, so then I don't have to make a brain of fashos. So if you're eating a fruit salad and you add enough figs, dates, or even together combined, there is an ounce of them, and plus I ate other fruits, I do not, or vegetables by the way, I do not need to make a brain of fashos. The eitz val pi ha'etz covers it completely. Okay, now now, what happens if I have cake and wine and fruits from Eretz Yisrael? So I make it all into one bracha. You say ala mechia val Coca-Cola, val gefen val pi gefen, val eitz val pi eitz. You know what it says in the city. You just combine them all together, and then you make one after bracha for all these different types of things. The same thing if somebody ate cake, an ounce, and drank 3 ounces of wine. So again, wine and the grapes the wine and the cake is combined into one after bracha. If it's Shabbos or Yom Tiv, you have to add Ritzei or Zachrenu L'Teva. But if somebody left it out by mistake, they do not have to repeat the Alamech. Okay, next is like this. Okay, what else is there now? When a person is eating, okay, generally, now if you leave your place, let's say you're eating in your house, we mentioned this briefly last week, you should always make sure to have in mind, I'm going to go to a different place, I'm going to eat there, and have it in mind, and best thing would even to be eating while you're still going there. Okay, another important din, by the way, not that anybody does it, but just like you're supposed to sit when you bench, in Shulchan Aruch it says, and the Rebbe brings it down, that when you make an alamichya, you also have to be sitting. Just like benching, you need to sit. I mean, if you stood, you don't have to bench again. But the proper way of benching is when you sit down, and the same thing with alamichya, it should be said while you're sitting. And generally speaking, according to halacha, by the way, you're not supposed to eat standing either. I mean, medically, they say you get fat feet. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. But even halachically, a person is supposed to sit down and eat properly or drink properly. You're not supposed to do that. There's an interesting Gemara. It's brought down in halacha also. The Gemara says, if somebody eats in the street, they're like a dog, and they're disqualified from being kosher witnesses because they have no dignity, no human dignity. And if you have no human dignity, you can't be relied on to be a witness about other people's human dignity. But Taisus in the Gemara, and that's brought down in the law also, that's only if it's like a meal. Like, for instance, to give you an example, somebody eating a snack in the street, that doesn't matter. But if somebody's eating a hot dog in the street, in a bun, that you really have to wash and bench, and that's really halachically a meal. So concerning that, if you're walking in the street eating a hot dog bun, so then you would be considered, according to the Gemara, like a dog, and you're not qualified to be a kosher witness. Okay, now what happens if somebody they ate enough, but they didn't make an after bracha? This happens so often. Everybody gets calls a lot about this a lot. You ate a piece of cake or a fruit, and you just forgot to make a bracha achrena. You forgot to make the after bracha. And you remind yourself an hour later, 2 hours later, what's the din? Do I make an after bracha or not? So in Shulchan Aruch, the din is that if you're still full from the food you ate, then you could still make an after bracha. If you're not full anymore, that means you digested and you're hungry again, so to speak, or you're not full, it's too late to make an after bracha. So it's always good to, when you finish eating, the best thing is right away to make an after bracha. Because again, a lot of people eat, this is what we know. In fact, when the Rebbe would verbringen, every verbringen, the Rebbe would finish the verbringen, and he would say in Yiddish, the Rebbe said, I'm sure those people that would have to make an after bracha from what they ate at the verbringen, it will definitely make an after bracha. The Rebbe used to remind everybody to make an after. It's something people just, we all know ourselves. You eat, you leave, and you forget that you have to make an after bracha, and you have an obligation rabbinically. If you ate enough, a kazayas or 3 ounces of liquid, you have to make an after bracha. So the person basically should make sure they make an after bracha right away, and it's something people should teach their children to make after brachas, teach their family, whatever, and they should do it themselves. Okay, next dinner is also in the concept of brachas. When do you make ha'etz? When do you make ha'adama? And when do you make a shahak? Okay, so the dinner is like this. Fruits that grow on a tree, you make very pure eitz. Very pure eitz means who created the fruits of a tree. Now, what is the definition of a tree? It's that the branches remain throughout the winter. There are many berries, even a banana, for instance. A banana tree is really a tree, but they chop it down and there's no branches left during the year. So then that's the reason, as we know, one of the reasons why in a banana you make Adam. It's a big tree. If you ever see a banana tree, it's a big tree. But it's not a tree that's branches remain during the winter when there's no fruit growing. So that doesn't qualify as a tree. So many berries would be Ha'adama for the same reason, because it doesn't have a din of a fruit. So something that grows on a tree, that means it's there the whole year, not the fruit, the branches of the tree are there a whole year, you make a berry pirates. If it doesn't, then it has a din, it grows, then it has a din of Adama, and you have to make Adama. And we learned before, if somebody by mistake on a fruit from a tree made Adama, it's fine because the tree comes to the ground. But if somebody made ha'etz on a vegetable, then it's not a kosher bracha because a vegetable doesn't grow on the tree. Now there's what happens. Okay, so now things that don't grow on trees and don't grow, what bracha do you make and all that stuff? So then you have, like, for instance, meat, fish, milk, cheese, all that stuff. All liquids except wine and olive oil, you make a shahakol. Shahakol niya bidvarei, that everything simply, what does the bracha mean? Shahakol, and according to the Alter Rebbe, even Kitzur Shulchan says nihiyah, not nihiyeh. Our nusach is shahakol, everything. Nihiyah came about, became bidvarei in his word. Hashem spoke and it became. By the way, the one exception to this halacha says is mushrooms. Mushrooms are shahakol. Even though mushrooms seemingly grow from the ground, so the Gemara halacha says no, they don't grow from the ground. They don't get nourishment from the ground. They get nourishment from the air. They happen to be sitting on the ground. So therefore, mushrooms are not considered a fruit from the ground. And therefore, on a mushroom, it's like anything else that you make a shahakol because it's not something that grows. Okay. Okay. Now, here's another issue with very pure eitz and very pure adam. You make a bracha, let's say eitz, on a fruit. You make a bracha or eitz on the fruit when the fruit is eaten raw, and that's the normal way of eating it. The same thing go adama. When do you make adama? You have certain vegetables that cannot be eaten raw. You just don't, normally we don't eat them raw. Okay, not that you can't, you can eat whatever you want. But I'm saying most people don't eat them raw. They only eat them cooked. Simple example of that is a potato. People generally don't eat raw potatoes today. So if somebody decided to eat a raw potato, the bracha would be shahakol near bidvari. Because the potato is growing from the ground not to be eaten raw. So if you're eating it raw, that's not why it came from the ground. So you have to make a shahakol near bidvari. Years ago, I mentioned this many times, it's very interesting. In Europe, in many places, they never ate raw carrots. They just didn't eat raw carrots. They ate simis. Simis is cooked carrots. And therefore, in many places in Europe, on a raw carrot, they would make a shahakol. In America, where people do eat raw carrots in a salad or plain, so that's eaten raw also. So therefore, if today in America, if you eat a raw carrot or cooked carrots, both are the way that vegetable or fruit, for instance, would be eaten. So then it would be ha'adam. But if you eat a raw potato or other fruits and vegetables that are not eaten raw, okay, then you can't make hadama or right. You have to make a shahak because it's not normal way of eating it. Okay. But the Moshe today, Today we do eat raw onions, and we do eat raw, a lot of garlic. People eat today raw garlic. You put garlic in a salad, so then that would also be ha'adam. Okay, but on radishes you make ha'adama. On garlic and onions you make, if they're normally eaten, you would make ha'adama, even though they're normally eaten with bread. Things that are better when they're raw than they're cooked. Okay, and now by cooking it, you're making it worse. You're making it worse. So then you would make a shahar. Whatever. Bottom line of this halacha is very simple. You make hadama ha'etz on a fruit or vegetable which is normally eaten the way you're eating it. If it's normally eaten raw, you make ha'etz or hadama. If it's not normally eaten that way, then you would make a shahako. And by the way, this is not a Kabbalah, so it could change with time. It could change with time. People will start eating, let's say, raw potatoes. So then the bracha of a raw potato will become hadama. Not, God forbid, the halacha is changing. It's just that the facts are changing. That now people eat it. If people eat it, then it becomes hadama. Okay. Salad. Okay. Okay. Now, what happens if somebody eats not the fruit itself? Let's say you have a fruit that the leaf of the fruit is also edible. I mean, I know an example of this. I can tell you simple other examples. For instance, you have an orange. Now, an orange is the fruit. The peel of an orange is edible. But the orange is not growing for the peel. So if somebody would eat, let's say, the orange peel, well, I'll give you an example. Sometimes when you have the thick oranges, the thick orange peels, not the fruit oranges, the eating oranges, and you have that white stuff inside that many people eat. I'm talking about inside the peel. There's the white stuff that's edible. If you only eat that, then you have to make ha'adama because it goes down a level. The fruit itself would be ha'etz. Anything secondary to the fruit would go down a level. So if it would be ha'etz, it would go down to hadama. If it would be ha'adama that you're eating it, then you would go to shahako. Whatever the places are, like he says, certain fruits that are edible, they used to eat them and cook them or spice them up, and they would eat them. By the way, one more thing I wanted to mention about it after bracha. By the way, if somebody eats grapes, you make ha'etz and you make the after bracha would be ala eitz or pri eitz. Raisins are the same thing, by the way. Raisins are just dried grapes. So if somebody eats raisins, let's say an ounce of raisins, they make ha'etz, and the after bracha is not very nefashis. The after bracha is ala eitz or pri eitz, because raisins are really grapes, dried grapes, but they're still grapes, and therefore they still have the prominence of grapes. So if somebody would be eating raisins, again, the bracha would be ha'etz, and the after bracha would not be very nefashis. It would be ala eitz or pri eitz. Okay. Okay, if somebody, let's say, would here in Shulchan it says like this: they used to take like cucumber peels, and they would fry them in oil and in sugar. Okay, they would take the peel of a cucumber, and I guess that's what they did in Europe. And he says then the bracha on that would be shahakol, because the cucumber is adama, but this is not the fruit. That's not why it was grown. It was grown for the cucumber. The vegetable, the fruit of the ground. So if somebody would take the peel of something and make marmalade out of, let's say, orange peels, or eat the orange peels and make chocolate covered orange peel, that's a separate shah what bracha you make on orange covered, What bracha do you make on chocolate covered peanuts? By the way, we should talk about that. It's very practical. What bracha do you make? Nowadays they have like this: chocolate covered almonds, chocolate covered raisins, chocolate covers like you have peanut chews, the kosher ones, all those types of fruits. What bracha do you make on them? It's a chocolate covered nut, but it's a nut, so it's a eight, but it's chocolate covered. So the question really in halacha is, why are you eating it? Are you eating it as a nut, or are you eating because it's chocolate, because it's a candy? Okay, it's sold not in the fruit department. It's sold in the candy department, in the chocolate department. So Rav Moshe Feinstein, for instance, interesting. We don't pass on like that, but Rav Moshe Feinstein says on a chocolate-covered nut you would make two brachas, one on the nut, one on the chocolate. But we paskin that a chocolate-covered nut, you're eating it as a candy, so the bracha is shahak. Chocolate-covered raisin, even though it's a raisin. But nevertheless, why are you eating it? As a chocolate. So that's for you the primary, and it would be shahakol niyabidvaru with the brain of fashis. All those different types of things. We're not getting to the mezainis, those we didn't get to yet. What bracha do you make on ice cream sandwiches? Well, we'll get to that maybe next week. I don't know when it is. But there's a lot of shilas. When do you make a mezainis? And if there's cake in there, when don't you make a mezainis? These are all very big shilas in halacha, what you do. Okay. Okay. Now, we have a few minutes. Now, there's a big argument in halacha about rice and millet. Okay. Now there is oras and dochen. Now in modern day Hebrew, oras is rice and dochen is millet. In halacha it says on oras that's cooked, oras is cooked, you make a mezainis, but afterwards bury nefashis. Because it's not really one of the 7 grain, one of the grains. But it's a prominent food, so you make a mezainis on it. Deichen, on the other hand, you either make it, depending how it's made, it's either a hadam or a shahak. So now what's the din if somebody eats rice? For dinner, you have meat and rice, chicken and rice, whatever. What bracha do you make on rice? So there could be 3 possibilities. It might be mezainis, if it's rice, if it's orez. It might be adama, and it might be shahak. So the Alter Rebbe writes in halacha that the preferred way is to eat rice only during the meal, when you wash. So then you don't have a question what bracha, because sometimes it could be mezainis, it could be adama, or it could be shahak. The after bracha for sure is only a berin of fashis. That's a given. But what first bracha gives? So what some people do is they'll take a little piece of mezainis, and they'll take a little piece of hadama, and they'll take a little piece of shahako, and that covers the rice. So let's say you're having, you have a salad, and you have chicken, and you have rice. So they'll make a shahako on the chicken, they'll make a hadama on the salad, and then they'll take a little piece of mezainis, so then they cover all the bases. But push comes to shove, the Alter Rebbe says, and this is with Alter Rebbe Paskins, it's almost different than most people do today. In the non-Chassidic world, they make a mezainis on rice. And after bracha bein nefash, but they'll make a mezainis on rice cakes. They'll make a mezainis on rice. If you're eating rice, they'll make a mezainis. But the Alter Rebbe says, bottom line, if you're eating it not within a meal, the Alter Rebbe Paskins, the bracha on rice is shahak. The bottom line is the way it's Chavadniks we hold. The Alter Rebbe Paskins clearly the best thing is to eat it during a meal, or to make those 3 brachas that the Alter Rebbe doesn't say, but it's understood. Or bottom line is you make a shahak on it. Okay, let's go to Tanya. and then we'll continue the bracha stuff next week.